So I'm going to grab my larger photograph. You may remember that this is the actual reference that I'm using for my drawing. But because his face was so small and I was really struggling to see some of the details that I knew were there when I was drawing out the shapes, I went ahead and just kind of zoomed in on that image and took a screenshot of my photo and then printed it larger. This has been really helpful for me when looking at details. If I think about this part of his helmet here, if I think about specifics about what's happening in his eyes, these are all places where I've used this photo instead of my reference photo. And ultimately, I mean, it's the same face, just a kind of different part of it. Okay, so you can certainly do that same thing that I did if it applies to you, right? Some of us are working with photos where the face takes up really the largest portion of the reference. If that's you, you probably won't feel like this is all that helpful. If your reference picture has a face where it's hand size, it's really quite small, and so it may be helpful to do what I did. We do have a printer here in our classroom, so for those of you who are coming in on A or B days, I can help you print that. For those of you who are home remote and maybe don't have a printer, the Media Center can also help us print things. You just have to be available to pick them up at door number 2. So we do have some ability to to help us get these resources no matter what our situation is. So I'm going to set this aside, and we're going to be working with this one here. I want to make sure that I have a really sharp pencil. I'm going to start with that. And I may have to grab an ebony. I have also been using my mechanical pencil in areas where I feel things are kind of tight or the spaces are small. And certainly the beard that I'm working with here is fairly small. And so when I want to make, little detail like hairs, I am also using that pencil there, okay? I want to start by erasing any grid lines that I have. I'm going to just do that now so that I don't have to worry about doing that later. You'll notice, maybe, hopefully, certainly one thing I'm noticing right now as I erase is that the grid lines aren't actually really erasing. They're still there. They are certainly lighter than they were originally, and his beard is probably medium in most areas. It's certainly darker than his skin, and there are some darks that kind of punctuate the space, and some kind of lighter areas as well. So I am going to be working with a full range of value. I want to start, if I haven't already, by kind of drawing out some of these shapes within his beard. So I can look at that in a variety of ways. I can either think about drawing out, the shape of a piece of his hair. What you're going to find is that typically hair forms into sections or pieces where we can see a defined shape. And usually it's separated by areas that are dark. So I can see this particular shape because I've got darks on either side that frame it. I could draw out those darks, right? That would be a little bit like thinking about drawing in the negative space or the negative shape. So if I have a really prominent dark value, I can draw the shape of that as well. So I might be drawing the shape of the positive form, like the shape of the hair as it forms into a section. I might be drawing the shape of a negative shape or the shape of a shadow that exists between sections of hair. I don't have to record everything. You know, I just want to kind of lay down where maybe the most important things are. I'm also interested in the kind of overall outline. And I seem to lost the edge here of his beard. So I'm going to grab my gridded drawing just so I can kind of see what's happening. So that just attaches up here. Okay. Then the next thing I want to do is I want to start to look at what's happening with dark values. So I'm going to put those in next. I'm going to start off working really loosely. Because I know I'm going to have to go back in and add in more of that kind of details of texture, either additively by, you know, adding in little lines or subtractively by erasing stuff out. So I want to start by shading in some of these darks. I am working with soft edges here. And you can see that I'm just shading the shapes versus drawing them with really defined edges. His beard is a little bit kind of bushy, maybe for lack of a better word. There are less defined shapes here than I would expect to see if I was drawing, you know, the hair underneath his helmet. So the shapes are softer. So I'd start just by kind of piecing in those dark values. Once I have the shapes kind of laid in and I'm thinking about how they separate, I want to start to add value. And I'm going to do this by working directionally. So if the hair on his beard kind of grows in this kind of wave, I'm going to shade in this kind of wave as well. So that way, if there's any lines left in my shading, that they start to suggest the texture, or they support that texture. So we can call these lines directional lines. We could also think of them maybe even as cross contour lines, or lines that run across the contour of a form. You see areas where the hairs kind of overlap and make it darker. There's a lot happening here. And it's really easy for me as I'm looking, as my eyes kind of toggle back and forth between my photo and my drawing. It's really easy for me to feel like I'm getting lost, like I lose my place. And that's really, I think, normal or natural in this type of work. So when that happens, when I feel like I kind of lose my place and I don't exactly remember where I'm working, I just go back over here and pick a spot, right? I want to try to capture the characteristics of his hair. The fact that, you know, that it's kind of got a little curl to it, that the hair is kind of coarse, that, you know, there's quite a range of value from things that feel really dark, auburn, to things that feel kind of strawberry blonde. I want to focus on those qualities, and so if I get lost, I just have to find a place and look at a section, look at a shape, and work that shape in. One of the nice things about hair is that if I get maybe this drawn with 70% accuracy, it's going to look pretty good. And I can continue to go back in and refine those small details. This whole section over here is really quite dark. Even when I'm just kind of valuing in an area, I want to work directionally so that I'm always thinking about what direction is the hair growth in. When we did this with the eyebrows as well, we needed to value in the shape. We needed to add in both additive or subtractive texture by working and following the direction of the hair growth. Now, every time I make a line or shade a line here, I'm working additively. I'm adding in material. I can also work subtractively. And subtractively allows me to kind of erase out what's happening. And there's a variety of different ways that you can do that. It depends really on how light your hair is. If he was blonde, I would probably use a larger eraser to erase out larger shapes in order to erase out kind of white lines within the hair. I can use my pencil's eraser to kind of go in and pull away and erase. I do have some electric erasers for those of us who are in class where we can do the same thing. The 3 different erasers that I've just mentioned all have 3 different size erasers, from very large to much smaller to really quite small. And that allows me to erase out lines that are large, medium, and small. And certainly the different hair that I'm working on would have different shapes. Here we can see that these hairs are really quite tiny, even maybe smaller in my original reference photo. Like the eyebrow, if I'm going to work additively and subtractively to add these textures, I need to be aware that even these erasers are impacted by pressure. So, and that I'm really thinking about drawing a white line. If the line I draw is too light or even too thick, I have to go back in. I can, shade on either side of it. I can thin the line out. I can shade over the top of it. Oops, my computer battery is going to die even though I'm plugged in. Let me check that again. feel like I'm plugged in, but. Okay, we'll see how it goes. So I may have to shade in and around those lines to make them more pronounced. I may have to shade over those lines in order to make the contrast between the dark and the light less, right? My battery life just went up, so I think I'm successfully plugged in here. Okay. So I'm just kind of working a little bit at a time. I wouldn't say that hair is harder. I would say that it's an extra step, right? If I think about the nose, I just drew the shapes of the nose, and I shaded the nose, and then I was done. In working with hair, I'm doing those things, but I'm also thinking about what's happening with the texture. Again, I can do that by adding in lines or erasing away lines. Like the other parts of the face, it's going to be important for me to have a full range of value, so that way I can convincingly create the illusion of form, right? Because the dark values are going to communicate recessed spaces, or spaces kind of far away, and the light values are going to communicate things that are closer. If I think about the nose, right, the way to make the tip of the nose feel like it's in front of the, say, cheek is the combination of the cast shadow here onto the cheek and that highlight on the nose. So this area drops back spatially, and this area comes forward. And that's how it looks like there might be an inch of space between those two areas. Okay. I don't know, does anybody have any questions about looking at hair? We're just working with an extra step, which we're doing partly in the way that we're shading, right, with directional lines, and partly, oops, in this kind of combination of additive and subtractive work. Okay, well. When it comes time for me to establish the bottom here, I am going to want to have this skin shaded in so that I can make these kind of light or low contrast marks sit in front of or on top of his neck. So that's going to feel a little bit like the eyebrow again, where I have to eliminate the skin at least minimally before I can add in those kind of smaller marks. And when I erase, I'm also thinking about working directionally, because I'm really thinking about my eraser almost like it's a white pencil or a white pen, where it allows me to work back in with white lines. All right,